So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my desire to pursue fat fire and my monthly budget. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about my desire to pursue fat fire and my monthly budget. So first off, let's start with what is FIRE. So for those who don't know, FIRE stands for Financially Independent, Retire Early. Although I'm not really interested in the retire early part, just the financial freedom aspect of it. Essentially, being financially free will give me the freedom to pursue my passions and do the things I want to do, while also choosing whether or not I want to work. Sounds pretty good, right? And you may be asking, well, how can you do it? Well, everyone is a bit different in terms of the life they want to live, be it how much they want to spend, how much they earn, and how much they save. So to begin your journey towards FIRE, you typically need to know a couple of things to assess what your journey would look like, which include your annual expenses, which is why I'm sharing my budget today, your annual income, your current net worth, and then your current savings rate, which in my opinion is more of a way to assess how much you gotta save, as the traditional 15 to 20% just doesn't cut it for those individuals who want to FIRE. So now that you know a bit about FIRE, there are actually many different types, but for the purposes of this video, I just wanted to cover two of them: lean FIRE and fat FIRE. So the average US household makes about $61,000 a year, according to the 2019 census data. Lean FIRE is when someone has saved up 25 times their annual expenses, which is the traditional benchmark for financial independence, and they spend less than that each year than the average American. So for the average household, which would have average expenses around $41,000, they would need $41,000 times 25, or roughly $1 million to be financially free. Now, in contrast, fat FIRE are typically individuals that want to retire early without being as frugal or giving up certain lifestyle comforts like living in a big city, eating at nice restaurants, and traveling. Now, for this example, we'll use a typical six-figure salary of an individual making $100,000, which would be multiplied by 25 and equal to $2.5 million to be financially free. So now that you're familiar with some of the numbers, how long does it actually take to FIRE? And this part is going to be heavily dependent on your savings rate and your current net worth. Now, there are many calculators out there, and we'll take a look at a few examples using some average numbers based on the Federal Reserve Board's survey of consumer finances that was released in September 2020. So I'm currently 33, so I fall in the less than 35 bucket. So for this example, I'm gonna use the average net worth of $76,300. And then because I'm a pharmacist, I'm gonna use the median salary for a pharmacist, which is usually $120,000, with a post-tax income being around $84,000. And I'm also gonna use my actual annual expenses, which again, I'm gonna share later, which is $57,000. Using one such calculator that I have, I'll have to save $27,000 or 32% of my income to achieve FIRE in 20 years by age 53 to reach a FIRE goal of $1.4 million, assuming 100% stocks at a 7% return. Now, looking at this, there were a few things that I can glean from it. First of all, I don't want to wait 20 years to do the things that I want to do. I want to do it sooner. Secondly, my earned income is probably too low, so I may want to dabble in some side hustles. And third, my savings rate is too low, so maybe I want to scale back on certain things and then increase my savings rate. All right, so now let me share my actual budget. All right, so here is my current budget. I have to admit, I'm slightly nervous about sharing this information because this is quite personal, to be honest, but I'm actually planning on starting a new YouTube channel to specifically only talk about personal finance and to show others what I'm doing to achieve FIRE. So I'm going to be very open and transparent with a lot of my financial data, or financial information. All right, so let's start off with the living expenses. I'm not gonna go through a lot of this in detail. I just wanna give you guys an idea of what my budget currently looks like, because I'm gonna have to make modifications to it. So currently, right now, living expenses account for the most. Rent is quite expensive. Usually I don't pay this much for rent in other places. Typically it's between $1,000 to $1,500. In this year, for 2021, I chose to live in a nicer place. So my rent is quite expensive. It probably amounts to about $2,300 a month. And then in this case, about $25,000 a year, quite substantial. Food is another big expense for me. I usually spend about $500 a month on groceries and then $200 eating out. Sometimes less, sometimes more, just kind of depends, but quite expensive, about $8,000 or so annually. So with that, my living expenses comes out to be about $3,300 a month or $39,500 a year. Moving on next, so I am a pharmacist. I pay a lot of fees professionally towards my pharmacy licensure, which is quite a bit here. I always wonder if I should discontinue some of them. I just haven't made that decision yet. But so I pay for licensure, CE credit, different programs, BCPS, membership fees to ASHP and AMIA, conferences. It's not too bad in the grand scheme of things. I pay about $140 a month and then about $1,600 a year. Moving on next is the recreational expenses. I spend quite a bit on subscriptions, which I'm sure many of us nowadays do. Amazon Prime, YNAB, which is You Need a Budget, it's a game changer for me. Audible and Blinkist for self-development type stuff. Currently I'm single, so I spend quite a bit of money on entertainment and leisure. Dates is pretty substantial. I'm spending maybe about $300 a month on that. Sometimes less, sometimes more, it just kind of depends. But activities with friends and eating out, and then charity. But the grand total for here is actually not too bad in the grand scheme of things in terms of like having fun, right? So I spend about $450 a month or $5,300 a year. Traveling is really important to me, especially in the last few years. I spend quite a bit on travel, to be honest. Wasn't a lot in 2020, but typically I travel about 2 to 4 times a month. So I do spend a lot of money on travel. Granted, I do maximize a lot of my travel expenses where I use points, stay with friends and things like that. The budget right here is more of a rough average for the entire year. And this is probably more of an overestimate than anything. But using this example, I'm spending about $625 a month on travel or $7,500 a year. Next is more of the exciting piece. I've always really enjoyed saving money because the amount of money that you gain later or through compounded interest is just so much more. So sacrificing a little bit today for long-term gains in the future. So I really enjoy this part. So I'm still saving money for a emergency fund / house down payment. I'm aiming for about 6 months to 1 year of savings right now. So it's taking a while. I'm shooting for a pretty large amount. I think about $40,000 to $60,000 in cash. I just had some experience where when I wanted to buy a house one time, I just didn't have the liquidity to do so. So it scarred me a little bit to want to do that. Plus, COVID-19 threw a lot of uncertainty, so it's good to have some type of emergency fund. So I'm being probably overly conservative in this case. I have some money that I budget every month for holidays and gifts. And then investing is quite fun. I'll create a video in the future that goes into this in detail, but I diversify in so many different ways for different reasons. And the ones you see here are purely my taxable accounts. So I do a lot of investing in my tax advantage accounts, but the ones I'm showing here in this budget are purely for my taxable accounts. But again, I'll talk about this more in the future, but I aim to spend about $1,000 a month in investing in taxable accounts to speed up my road to FIRE. So in this bucket, I save about $1,450 a month and then $17,400 a year. The last expense are my business expenses. So I don't think a lot of people actually realize this, but I spent a lot of money to run the YouTube channel because I put a lot of effort into the production quality and the assets that I create from it. So maybe I'll share this more in the future on why I use some of these things, but I'll briefly talk about them. Calendly helps me with scheduling, Google Drive for like distributing photos to people, Adobe Creative Suite for all my like editing and post-processing stuff. Epidemic Sound is my music subscription when I put music into my videos. Storyblocks is stock video footage where I share, or sometimes I might use stock videos. That's actually pretty new, I think in the last couple months. QuickBooks is for my business accounting. Squarespace is my website for pretty much everything. With a business, I started an LLC this past year, actually just yesterday for myself. And it does cost a little bit to run, you know, $125 for a registered agent per year. You have a basic business license, a home occupation permit, and then biennial report. And it's state specific, and this is specific for DC. Business equipment. So usually I spend a lot of money on business equipment, not only because it's fun to buy things, but I'm trying to increase the production quality. And sometimes having nicer gear, although not a necessity, can help create a certain look and feel that you want. And I've been spending a lot of money on that. But I'm at a point where I have the majority of the gear that I need, and I probably don't need to spend too much more. So this is reflective of that. And I probably spend $1,000 a year. I feel like that's not gonna be the case. I enjoy buying lens and other camera equipment, so it'll probably be a little higher. But for the most part, let's just say $1,000 a year. And the total business expenses actually aren't too bad. So it's about $250 or $260 a month and about $3,100 a year. Bringing my total budget, to be $6,200 a month or $74,500 a year. If you remove the savings aspect of it and just purely look at the expenses, it's about $4,750 a month or $57,000 a year. And if we use lean fire, if I really wanted to just retire early, my fire number would be $1.4 million in that case. So that's kind of it for the budget. I'll share more details of my other financial data in the future videos. Well, that's gonna be a wrap for this video. If you liked the content, do give it a thumbs up. If you wanna follow me along on my FIRE journey, be sure to subscribe. And eventually I'm gonna be sharing my real numbers aside from my budget, so you can all follow along to see if I can actually make it to FIRE. But in the interim, comment below about what you all think about FIRE and whether it's something you plan to pursue in the future. All right, guys, hope you all are all staying safe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.